sunny South Florida, broadcasting around the world. You're listening to the Dennis Hendrickson Podcast. Live from sunny South Florida, broadcasting around the world. Around the world. You're listening to the Dennis Hendrickson Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Truth America. I'm your host, Dennis Hendrickson. Thank you for being here on a Saturday night. I'm already annoyed. And hopefully this won't carry over for the rest of the night, but, as much as I like X, formerly known as Twitter, it is a pain in the balls when it comes to going live with them. I thought I had everything all figured out and all taken care of until I'm getting ready to go live. And of course, it's saying that I timed out. So I'm sure you guys don't care about that, but the details, I can hear you all saying thank you right now. But here we are live on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Twitter, and Odyssey. I will say, well, YouTube's a pain in the ass. Not only are they a pain in the ass to go live, but they also shadow ban you. Rumble is super easy to go live because they give you a static IP or a static like URL to go live and also a static streaming key. BitChute, they're new, so I'm going to give them a little bit of slack because they're kind of new in the game. They give you a static URL, but they don't give you a static streaming key. Hopefully they'll do that soon. And Odyssey, static everything, so I could just go online and everything's cool. And I actually use Odyssey, which I probably don't get as much following there as my default place to go live because it's so easy. But most of you that are probably watching this don't know anything about Odyssey and what Odyssey is. But it's a very good streaming platform, an alternative to YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, all those places. So anyway, I'll stop bitching now and get into the show. Good evening. Welcome to Truth America. I'm your host, Dennis Hendrickson. And tonight, our live stream, we're going to dive into the controversial book chapter on Kamala Harris from Peter Schweizer's bestseller, Profiles in Corruption. And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. We'll explore allegations and insights presented in the book that scrutinize Harris's political and financial dealings during her career. But first, we're going to look into Tim Walz's balls and his military service, because that's making big news today on how he has been, considered whatever the stolen valor thing. He's being called out for that. And of course, we need to check in on former Vice President Joe Biden and see what he's up to, since no one's heard from him in a while. And so let's go ahead and get into it. So some of you, let me know in the comment section if you've heard about this, but Tim Walz, who is the vice president selection by Kamala Harris as her running mate, has been talking about his military service, I guess for several years now. And apparently it's a bunch of BS. And Tim Walz's military superior was on CNN, I think it was today. And while he was being interviewed, was talking about it and was cut off by CNN because he was telling the truth about really what was going on. And of course, as usual, we've seen this before with CNN where, hey, your audio's cutting out or your satellite feed isn't working. And we'd love to hear from you, but we've got to cut you off. So let's talk about
as far as being a command sergeant major, he, as soon as he retired, or I'm going to go with the term retired, which he did, and he was eligible after 20 years to get a full retirement. He was taken out of the academy at that time. Here's another thing about.
Well, Sergeant Major, I do want to hear that. I do want to hear what you have to say, Sergeant Major. I know I want to be sensitive of your time, and your audio is beginning to break up just a little bit, but I do want to thank you because I think you've clarified a lot for people and given more information. The question now is how the voters will evaluate it. Sergeant Major Doug Julien, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
So, I mean, it's so obvious that, and again, CNN has pulled this bullshit before. Cutting a guy off who is making Kamala Harris and the running mate look bad. And, you know, this just goes to show you beyond any reasonable doubt that CNN, MSNBC, ABC, all the alphabet networks are an arm of the Democratic Party, the DNC. And apparently, it's gotten so bad that the Harris campaign is actually coming out and saying, okay, you know, he's got this wrong. It's an issue. And, you know, more and more people on X, and this is why I love X, because of the information. I can't stand X when it comes to going live because it's so cumbersome and it's such a pain in the ass. But when it comes to information, when it comes to politics, this is where everybody goes. This is the place to be. And Kyle Becker, very well known on X, very good journalist. Here is the corrected military service record of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who is presidential candidate Kamala Harris's vice presidential nominee. It shows that Tim Walz's demotion from Command Sergeant Major E9 to Sergeant Major E8. This does not happen years later, as Walz suggested, but on September 10th, 2005, 4 months after discharge, Kamala Harris's VP choice has repeatedly claimed that he was a retired Command Sergeant Major since his discharge. His military service record shows otherwise. So this has been going around, and, you know, I'm not a military guy. I don't know the details, but apparently this is a big enough deal to where people are saying, hey, look, you know, you are not representing yourself like you should, and you haven't in the past. And this is a major problem. But what's going to happen here? Nothing. They're going to sweep this under the rug. It's not going to be a major thing. If this was someone like J.D. Vance, who, by the way, someone, I think it was on MSNBC, had said that, a talking head on MSNBC said that after all of this, I wish I had this on here. I'm actually going to find it. But they had said that J.D. Vance did not have a military career. Now that I remember it, I cannot go any farther without saying that. Bear with me. See if I can find it quick.
Deeper into that, he was a...
I'm sure I'm not. You know, these are the types of things that'll get scrubbed from the internet. Oh, here it is. Okay, I'm going to play the audio. Actually, let's see if I can stick it into my show notes. All right, let's play this, see if it works.
Well, here is Tim Walz, who enlisted when he was 17 years old. He served in the National Guard for 24 years, and I'm not aware of any military service that J.D. Vance has ever served. So let's just make the comparison there. And what happened in the tragedy of the killing of George Floyd and then the unrest. Yeah, okay, pardon me for that.
Pardon me for that. I can't believe I forgot about that and I didn't put it in my show notes for tonight. But this, okay. This is someone who is preparing for a show on CNN. Tina Smith, who's a Democrat from Minnesota. And you don't know that J.D. Vance was in the military? You didn't prepare for that? This goes to show you who's in our government. I mean, this is a joke. These are the people that are in our government right now. It's pathetic. And this is why we live in the world that we live in now. Everything sucks. And I was talking about this earlier. The communists and the people that are trying to take over our government in North America and Europe, in their playbook, they say, call yourselves progressives. Do not call yourselves communists or Marxists. Call yourselves progressive. And the reason for that is because we don't want anyone knowing exactly what it is that we're doing. Which is understandable. I mean, they want to, of course, kind of hide the fact that they're communists. And these same people, when they call themselves progressives, it's really the opposite. I mean, we're experiencing the opposite of what they call themselves. We're regressing in society in North America and Europe. We're going back to the days of where our ancestors had to go out and find their own food. They had to forage for themselves. What's happening to our food supply? We're having our food manufacturing plants being destroyed. We have massive fires that are killing and culling our meat supply. How is customer service these days when it comes to the things that you do every day? Whether it be restaurants, whether it be auto repair, whether it be just your regular daily things for the last, those of you have been around for the last 20, 30 years or more. How has customer service been? Has it gotten better or has it gotten worse? Everybody I talk to says it's gotten significantly worse, especially after COVID. People don't want to work. People don't care about their jobs. People don't give a shit anymore. It's like you have to do their jobs for them, even though you're paying them to do the jobs for you. You're paying them. They don't do the job. You end up having to do it yourself. even in the medical field. It's like, do you need me to do that for you? Are you that incompetent as a medical professional that even though I'm paying you to do this shit, do I have to fucking do it myself because you're that fucking incompetent? That's what's happening. Do I need to change that tire? Do I need to fix that engine? Do I need to make that burger? Do I need to do all these things because you're so fucking stupid and lazy and pathetic, even though I'm paying you to do it? That's what we live in now. We live in that society. We live in that world. That's what communists are. They are not progressive. They are regressive. They destroy everything, and we're allowing it to happen. You know how I know that? Here's Tim Walz, arrested for a DUI in the 1990s. Not only does he lie about his military record, here's a guy who's just a degenerate all the way around. Now, if this, and the thing is, okay, you made a mistake, DUI, whatever. People make mistakes. But can you imagine if this was the vice president, if this was J.D. Vance? If J.D. Vance lied about his military career, if there was a DUI when it came to J.D. Vance, even though I'm not a fan of J.D. Vance, J.D. Vance was a never-Trumper. That's a whole different scenario. Can't stand the guy. Wish he wasn't running as vice president, but he is. Can you imagine if this was somebody else on the Republican side? A good point, Helen. You grew up, you were expected to work, just like all of us are. We're expected to work. And you bring up a great point. We are all expected to work. This is the problem. We are the middle class, the white middle class of America, who go out there and work our ass off. We pay the taxes. We're the ones who are the producers. We're the ones who create. And who are the ones who are shit on day in and day out? It's the people who create. It's the people who work. It's the middle class. And at some point, and this is the thing, the communists can't think out 15 minutes, 15 days, 15 months, 15 years. They can't think outside or in front of them to understand that without people producing, you don't have the taxpayer dollars coming in. And this is what we're experiencing now. We're running out of the taxpayer dollars and we can't fund this stuff anymore. And it's all going to come to a head and it's all going to be over. It's just an eventuality. I mean, it's going to happen. People don't work anymore. And that's what communism is. That's what Marxism is. That is what the UN is doing to North America and Europe. They're trying to destroy those who actually create and turn them into a society that relies on the government. It never works. It didn't during Soviet communism. It didn't work during the Bolshevik Revolution. It just didn't work. So it's one of those things where, and I'm kind of demoralized by what's going on in the UK, because seemingly what's happening in the UK with the illegal immigration, this is what the people in the UK voted for. They have paper ballots. They have somewhat, I mean, they have voter identification. It's not like in the United States where they're, you know, you have computers that can be hacked and you have no voter ID and you have, you know, electronic ballots and all this other stuff. So, you know, really, did the UK citizens really vote for this stuff? And I guess they did. And the ones that are really upset, obviously, to the point where they're rioting in the streets, well, you're getting sent to prison for 24 months, and the prime minister is threatening 10 years. That's a communist government. That's a Marxist government. Once again, never worked, but you have to live through it and deal with it, go to jail, all these other things, and come out of it on the other side. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we have to fight through the demoralization and do whatever we can. It's not easy, though, because you're putting yourself and your family at risk when you go out there and you fight and you have the Prime Minister of the UK saying that we're going to put you in jail, and you have the police in the UK threatening United States citizens, which I was going over last night, saying, oh, we're going to use terrorism laws to extradite you to the UK. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but it has a chilling effect. So I didn't want to kind of go off on a tangent when it came to that, because I went through all of that last night. But let's check in on the President of the United States, Joe Biden, see what he's doing right now. It's unbelievable. Sitting there on the beach. Can you believe it's, to them, they don't give a shit because they know that all of us are just going to sit there and take it. I mean, everything that's going on in the world, and this guy is laying on the beach in Delaware. And once again, like I've said before, if this was a Republican president, if this was Donald Trump, can you imagine Donald Trump? There's no way in hell that Donald Trump would be laying on the beach ever. But here you have our president, he's the former vice president, in my opinion. He's not the real president, because I believe the election was stolen beyond any reasonable doubt. But he's on the beach, laying on the beach. I mean, this is a spitting in the face of the citizens of America. That's what this is. But let's get into, and then, Kamala Harris, who is obviously currently the vice president of the United States. And tonight, I wanted to read some part of the chapter on Kamala Harris and Profiles in Corruption, written by Peter Schweizer. And this is some interesting information related to her, and I think provides some very good background on who she is and what she's all about, and why it seems that she ended up becoming the next heir apparent to the presidential, or becoming the president of the United States, is because of her background with Barack Obama. So I'm going to read some of that tonight. And obviously, those of you who are going to leave some chat messages, I'll read that as I go. But tonight, we're going to make it basically a story time night. So let me get into the profiles and corruption, abuse of power by America's progressives and Kamala Harris. President Barack Obama stood in front of an array of well-heeled donors in a private home in super-rich Atherton, California. Having just been reelected 5 months earlier, he was touting his White House accomplishments. After a few comments, he praised California Attorney General Kamala Harris, who was also in the room. He highlighted her dedication and brilliance. He also added, "She also happens to be, by far, the best-looking Attorney General in the country." While the comment struck some observers as inappropriately personal and unprofessional, they revealed the close and long history that Obama and Harris shared. And I didn't know this until I read this book. Harris had first supported Obama while he was running for the Senate in Illinois back in 2004. After he was elected, Obama flew out to San Francisco and held a fundraiser for Harris. She had just been elected San Francisco District Attorney and needed to retire some campaign debt. The newly minted senator from Illinois showed up at San Francisco's famed Bimbos on Broadway to help. In 2007, when Obama announced his plans to run for president in Springfield, Illinois, she was again by his side. Harris and several members of her family joined the campaign. Harris, her sister Maya, and brother-in-law Tony West would labor over the next year to help Obama's ambition to become a reality. Kamala walked the snowbound precincts of Iowa, visited New Hampshire, and traveled to Nevada and Pennsylvania to campaign for him. Harris took the helm of his California campaign, serving as co-chair. When Obama won, she was with him in Chicago's Grant Park to celebrate the victory. So this is a big deal. And if you wonder, like a lot of people have been saying, well, wait a minute, the voters didn't select Kamala Harris to be president. There are plenty of other people. I mean, even Gavin Newsom, who's a piece of trash, and other people who could have been the Democratic nominee, but the Democrats decided that Kamala Harris was going to be the one. The voters didn't matter. And when you see and you read about this and the history, which I didn't know until I read the book, you see this background. You start to realize, okay, who's really running the country right now? And how many people have said that Barack Obama is really behind the scenes running things? And yeah, and Helen, that Obama is, yeah, I think Trump, when he brought up the whole birth certificate thing, it makes you wonder. But there's no doubt in my mind that Obama is a communist he was put in place. And you see this history with Kamala Harris, and I'm going to go into more. Of course, people have been talking about the Willie Brown thing, and this is obviously mentioned here. This is all pre-programmed. This is all going on behind the scenes, all happening without any control of the voter. It's not the voter has no control over anything anymore. And those who are in the Democratic Party should be pissed off at the fact that this decision was made on your behalf, that Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party for president. Now, for me, I would always say, okay, or I would say, if it's somebody like Biden who decides that, okay, I'm going to drop out, then the likely person to come in would be Kamala Harris, because she's the vice president. But, I could also see the argument, and I think the fair thing would be, you make this decision way before the DNC, and you let the voters decide on who is going to replace Biden as the nominee. But I think all of this stuff was already pre-decided. And I'm surprised that more people aren't talking about this, especially this background between Kamala Harris and Obama. Harris is widely admired in progressive circles as the, quote, female Obama. Smooth, polished, and confident, she has worked hard to, quote, cultivate a celebrity mystique while fiercely guarding her privacy. The rising star in the Democratic Party also has a taste for expensive Manolo Blahnik shoes and Chanel handbags. Anybody know? Okay, women in the chat. Manolo Blahnik, Blahnik. I've never heard of those shoes before. I've obviously heard of Chanel handbags, but not Manolo Blahnik. Anybody know what those types of shoes are? Harris paints herself as a gritty lawyer who is climbing the ladder of power by her own strength and determination. She has also positioned herself as a, quote, smart on crime, even publishing a book by that same title. The reality of her rise to prominence is far more complicated, and how she has leveraged her power along the way is troubling. Harris's elevation to national politics is closely tied to one of California's most allegedly corrupt political machines, and investigations into her tenure as a prosecutor raised disturbing questions about her use of criminal statutes in a highly selective manner, presumably to protect her friends, financial partners, and supporters. So this is going to get into some of the issues with not only Willie Brown, but other things as well. And we've heard some of the stories about her as a prosecutor, but this really gets into detail. Okay, so $1,200 a pair of shoes. Most disturbing, she has covered up information concerning major allegations of criminal conduct, including some involving child molestation. Kamala Harris was born to Donald Harris, her Jamaican-born father, and Dr. Shyamala Gopalan, her Tamil Bahim mother from India. Her father is a Marxist economist who taught at Stanford University. He's a Marxist. And what do you think Kamala Harris is? Do you think that the apple far from the coconut tree? I mean, Obama is a Marxist, and they have a long history, and of course her father is a Marxist. And so, of course, what do you think Kamala Harris is? So he's a Marxist economist who taught at Stanford University. At one point, he advised the Jamaican government. She's not an African American, obviously. Her mother was a highly regarded research scientist who worked in the field of breast cancer. Her parents were divorced when Kamala was 5, and her mother's family had a defining influence on her childhood. Now, all of a sudden, she's black now, representing herself as, in my opinion, African American, which she's not. Father is Jamaican. The father, as Helen correctly says, doesn't like her. But she's always said that she's Indian. Now, all of a sudden, she's African American or black. A lot of blacks have been speaking out against that, saying that this is ridiculous, that she's not. So she says, quote, "One of the most influential people in my life, in addition to my mother, was my grandfather, T.V. Gopalan, who actually held a post in India that was like the Secretary of State position in this country," Harris recalled. "My grandfather was one of the original independence fighters in India, and some of my fondest memories from childhood were walking along the beach with him after he retired and lived in Basant Nagar in what was called Madras." Harris draws on those Indian roots to define herself. Quote, "When we think about it, India is the oldest democracy in the world. So that is part of my background, and without question has had a great deal of influence on what I do today and who I am." Okay. A lot of people have been calling this out. She's always said that she's Indian. And that's her background. Never talked about being black. She can't say that she's African American because she's not. And now all of a sudden. But, you know, of course, that's politics. Harris recounts regular visits as a child to her mother's homeland. After she was elected district attorney of San Francisco in 2003, she traveled to India and found that her grandmother had organized a party and press conference for her. So she goes to India and her grandmother puts together this party. I mean, let's just be honest. Kamala Harris is an Indian. That's what she is. Her grandfather was still a government official in Chennai. Quote, "One by one, people came to pay homage. It was like a scene out of The Godfather," Kamala said. She's a celebrity in India. Harris was close to her grandfather, who was a, quote, "joint secretary in the central government." I mean, her family was heavily in the government in India. Probably still is. And, quote, "instilled in her a thirst for service." So the whole idea of her becoming a politician in the United States was based on her family in India being so involved in the government there. Do you see how much of this entire thing with Kamala Harris is a lie? She's going to become the next president, or potentially, hopefully not, the next president of the United States, and that's the next presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. And she's running on being, let's be honest, she's trying to be an African American. And here it is. Everything about her is based on India, and her whole family is in politics in India. While Harris attended Howard University, a traditionally black college, and served as president of the Black Law Students Association at Hastings College of Law in San Francisco, many saw her leaning more towards her mother's culture than her father's. what I just said. According to her mother, Shyamala, Kamala knows all the Hindu mythology and traditions, and that Kamala will be equally at ease in a temple or church. Harris was born during Dussehra, a major Hindu celebration. So I gave her the name thinking of goddess Lakshmi. Shyamala insisted that giving her daughters names derived from the Indian pantheon was important to her child's development. A culture that worships goddesses produces strong women, she says. Adds her mother, Kamala is a frequent visitor to the Shiva Vishnu Temple in Livermore, California. Sounds black to me. She performs all rituals and says all prayers at the temple. My family always wanted the children to learn traditions, irrespective of their place of birth. I'll continue, but I wanted to just kind of pause for a second because how insane is this? I mean, this is absolutely crazy. That if you're really not paying attention and you're not reading a book like this, you have no idea that you're being lied to. Now, of course, there's skepticism and cynicism when it comes to the right, when it comes to Kamala Harris. She's obviously not well liked by virtually everyone, including people that she works for. Khalifa, welcome. Helen, thanks for stopping by. But, you know, this is really a big deal. But now we're going to get into Willie Brown. I mean, if that's not enough, that Kamala Harris is trying to act like she's African American when she's actually technically Indian and celebrating the fact that she's Indian. Here we go into the Willie Brown situation. Kamala Harris's entree into the corridors of political power largely began with a date. In 1994, she met Willie Brown, who at the time was the second most powerful man in California politics. As Speaker of the State Assembly, Brown was a legend in Sacramento and around the state. He represented a district in the Bay Area and was well known in San Francisco social circles. In addition to running the California Assembly, Brown ran a legal practice on the side, which meant taking fees from lobbyists and industries that may have wanted favorable treatment in Sacramento. Brown was under investigation several times by the State Bar of California. Hey, by the way, no state bars investigate any lawyers anymore, because if they did, all the lawyers and the judges that were involved in all the Trump trials would be under investigation right now. But it goes to show you over time what ends up happening to these lawyers and these bar associations. So he was under investigation not only by the State Bar of California, but the Fair Politics Practices Commission. I don't know what that is. I guess they don't exist anymore. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, which we know what they do now. In 1986, for example, as California Assembly Speaker, he, quote, received at least $124,000 in income and gifts from special interests that had business before the legislature. So in other words, he took over six figures from people wanting favors from Willie Brown. Despite a lifetime in politics and public service, Brown was known for his expensive Brioni suits, Borsalino hats, Ferraris, and Porsches. How about that? A public servant who was driving around in a Ferrari. Later, he downgraded to a Jaguar. I thought that was pretty funny in the book. Quote, my body would reject a Plymouth, he said. This is Willie Brown, baby. This is the one, if anybody knows the Willie Brown stories with Kamala Harris, this is the guy. Along the way, he played a version of himself in The Godfather Part 3. Brown finally retired from political office in 2004. He purchased a $1.8 million condo in St. Regis in San Francisco 2 years later. $1.8 million back then, 2006. Can you imagine what that looked like? Willie Brown was married in 1958 and remains so today. Not to Kamala Harris. But that did not matter. Brown was 60 at the time and began dating Kamala, who was 29. This goes to show you who Kamala Harris is, knowingly dating a married man. Brown was actually 2 years older than her father. Their affair was the talk of San Francisco in 1994. Kamala's mother, this is funny, defends her daughter's decision and offered choice comments about Brown. Quote, why shouldn't she have gone out with Willie Brown? He was a player. And what would Willie Brown expect from her in the future? He has not much life left. This is what Kamala Harris's mother said. Brown began pulling levers for Harris that both boosted her career and put money in her pocket, rewarding Kamala with appointments to state commissions that paid handsomely and did not require confirmation by the legislature. He put Kamala on the State Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board and later the California Medical Assistance Commission. The Medical Assistance Commission paid $99,000 a year in 2002. The Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board paid around $114,000 a year. Both posts were part-time. At the time, she was working as a county employee making around $100,000. Along the way, Brown also bought young Kamala a new BMW. Perhaps the most important thing Brown gave Harris was access to his vast network of political supporters, donors, and sponsors. Soon she was publicly arm in arm with Brown in the most elite circles of San Francisco, including lavish parties and celebrity galas. And by 1995, Willie Brown was running for mayor of San Francisco, and Harris was regularly by his side. On election night, Willie Brown stood before his guests at the Longshoremen's Union Hall. He was all smiles as the election results rolled in. Harris was in front of the crowd with him, smiling, and handed him a blue baseball cap emblazoned with "Duh, Mayor." Brown placed the cap on his head, and then Reverend Cecil Williams, a local fixture and longtime Brown friend, handed him a piece of paper. Quote, "It's over," he proclaimed. The election wasn't the only thing that was over that night. Many had speculated that Brown would divorce his wife and marry Harris, but that didn't happen. Shortly after Brown's electoral victory, he and Harris split up. There are conflicting reports as to who actually left whom, Most accounts report that Brown broke up with Harris. After the split, Kamala Harris started dating another prominent man. Maybe some of you have heard about this. Television talk show host Montel Williams. The romance between Brown might have been over, but Harris had political ambitions of her own, and the two remained allies. Brown, as mayor, would prove to be enormously helpful in her rise to political power. Willie Brown possessed the most powerful political machine in Northern California. As mayor, he leveraged that power to enrich his friends and allies. During his tenure, Brown came under FBI investigation twice for corruption involving lucrative contracts flowing from the city to his political friends. His operation was soon dubbed, quote, Willie Brown, Inc. Even local Democrats who might agree with Brown's political views were turned off by the cronyism and corruption that was rampant under the mayor. Quote, I only thought it was third world countries that people were forced to pay bribes to get services they were entitled to from the government, said U.S. District Judge Charles Legg about the rampant corruption under Brown. But we find it right here in San Francisco. 3 years or so after Brown's election, San Francisco District Attorney Terrence Hallinan hired Kamala Harris to head up the office's career criminal unit. Hallinan, nicknamed KO for his boxing skills, was a tough progressive who had little problem taking on the most powerful forces in San Francisco, whether it be the police or the new mayor. Hallinan insisted that Harris's connection to Willie Brown had nothing to do with the hiring. Whether it did or not, Hallinan would soon regret his decision. Shortly after she joined Hallinan's office, the number 2 slot in the prosecutor's office opened up. Harris wanted the job, but Hallinan chose someone else. Brown seemed furious at Hallinan, ostensibly for other matters. The mayor was publicly attacking Hallinan for failing to do his job. An insider had a different take. Quote, this whole thing was about Kamala Harris. One Brown friend told the San Francisco Chronicle, cross one of Willie's friends and there will be hell to pay. The relationship between Willie Brown and Terrence Hallinan had always been a complicated one. Hallinan had publicly embraced one of Brown's rivals, Tom Amiano. Hallinan also had been investigating Brown allies for corruption. Passed over by Hallinan, Harris abruptly left the district attorney's office and went to work at the city's attorney's office, which was run by a close Brown ally. Soon the Brown machine was cranking up to help Kamala Harris run against Hallinan. By 2003, Harris threw her hat in the ring and announced her decision to challenge Hallinan for his position at San Francisco District Attorney. Less known in San Francisco than her opposition, she regularly came in as a distant third in opinion polls, often registering in the single digits. But she could count on the Willie Brown machine, which at the time ran so much of San Francisco. Rebecca Prozanen, a former Willie Brown aide, was brought in as Harris's campaign manager to give her a boost. Harris's finance chair was Mark Buell, a major Democratic Party fundraiser. A political consultant named Philip Mueller set up an independent expenditure committee called the California Voter Project. Armed with a letter from Brown, he raised money to help boost her campaign. Mueller had worked on both of Brown's mayoral races. Beyond Mueller's independent efforts, the flow of money directly into her campaign was unlike anything the district attorney's race had ever seen. She's hauling in campaign cash like there's no tomorrow, said the San Francisco Weekly. Much of the money came from the super wealthy of San Francisco who were close to Brown. The mayor himself gave the maximum contribution, $500, and penned a letter to Philip Mueller, his close aide, who took around to wealthy donors to raise cash. The letter asked the San Francisco elite to cough up $500 each to help Kamala win. While Kamala Harris would later cast the campaign as a grassroots operation, it was much more exclusive than that. The San Francisco elite embraced her, which meant all-white fundraisers in Pacific Heights. Frances Bowes, heir to the fortune made from hula hoops and frisbees, hosted an event and brought friends like romance novelist Danielle Steele to write large checks. Bowes had originally met Harris through a longtime Willie Brown crony, while Brown and Harris were still dating. The Brown endorsement of her campaign also opened doors and wallets. Why, Willie Brown just wrote us a letter on her behalf, Bowes said. Friends and alliances with San Francisco elite she had formed while dating Willie Brown also came to her aid. The Getty clan, heirs to the vast J. Paul Getty fortune, were strongly behind Harris, and Vanessa and Billy Gates became good friends. So I'm going to leave it at this. They were supposed to keep the amount of donations to a certain amount. And so the upstart challenger, who was Harris, she was dramatically outraising funds for the incumbent. And this all had to do with Willie Brown and Willie Brown's connections. She raised double what Hallinan did. The money flow was so great that it led Hallinan to allege that Harris broke the law by surpassing a voluntary spending cap that she had pledged in writing to honor. In January 2003, shortly after announcing her campaign, she had signed a form saying that she would stick to the city's $211,000 voluntary spending cap for the campaign. An official handbook put out by the city's Department of Elections identified candidates that had signed the pledge. The voter's guide is designed to let voters know which candidates agree to abide by the law. Kamala Harris signed the pledge and then blew right past the spending limit. By the end of November, she had raised $621,000, almost 3 times more than the cap she had pledged to honor. The San Francisco Ethics Commission voted to fine Harris, and her campaign had to pay $34,000 in a fine. So, you know, it's just everything about Kamala Harris, just one thing after another, is just corruption after corruption after corruption in the early 2000s. And her connection with Obama is hugely important. And this Willie Brown thing, I don't think people understand the connections that Willie Brown had and his corruption, and how these people, these socialites in San Francisco, gave her all of this money to run for Attorney General. And, okay, so she had to pay a $34,000 fine. Didn't matter. Blowing past the financial cap was not just, I mean, that wasn't the only ethical issue that was raised related to her campaign. Critics questioned the donations she accepted from individuals with matters sitting before her at her office in the city attorney's office. In particular, she was taking campaign contributions from slumlords with cases before her office. According to Harris's campaign donor filings, more than 10% of her donors were owners or operators of single-room occupancy hotels, identified as problematic by city officials. Donors included hotel owners, cited by city officials as a city nuisance, because of numerous arrests for drug activity, assault, rape, robbery, and burglary. Another donor was the son of a hotel owner who verbally harassed a deputy city attorney and at one point threatened to shoot the attorney over code enforcement. Hey, Kazan. Yeah, there have been numerous photos of the Harris campaign deals where they look like they're AI generated. Now, it's hard to know for sure whether or not that's somebody, creating those things and putting them out there and saying it's Kamala Harris's campaign. I don't know. But yeah, I've seen some of those, but it's hard. I haven't really kind of gone into that. I do know this, and I think I might have mentioned it last night, that these Harris campaigns, I mean, when you look at Megan Thee Stallion, who's a degenerate, was giving a concert. Of course, there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to go to that rally because of her singing. And then some other guy, I can't remember the name of the guy, I've never heard of him before, doing another concert. I just can't imagine that many people being part of those campaign stops, just like Donald Trump all of a sudden. But it's very possible, especially since they've switched now and Biden's gotten out of the race. And the other thing that I've heard is they're paying tons of homeless people to show up to these events, and they're busing a ton of people to go to these events as well. There's also a lot of Bethany said, there's a guy in one of the videos with 4 arms. There's also a lot of actually, last night I was in a space where they are showing, or they were talking about how much money was being given to these these guys who are posting things like Harry Sisson, the Krasenstein brothers, et cetera, that are getting anywhere between $2,500 to $25,000 for posting things online, anti-Trump and pro-Kamala Harris. And that doesn't surprise me at all, that they're paying these influencers to do this stuff. So, and again, you just can't trust anything that you see at all. But yeah, I think the Kamala Harris campaign is probably getting a little bit of a bump. I think a lot of it is probably bullshit. Yeah, definitely, Kazan. There are a lot of people, I think, that are being paid to be there. Yeah, union members or whoever else. It's definitely not organic like Trump at all. There's no way. So there's a lot of people that are definitely being bussed in there, and I would not doubt that they're using AI images. I can tell you this: Chris Jackson, Harry Sisson, Brooklyn Dad Defiant, and I've been blocked by JoJo from Jers, but those guys have used AI generated Biden photos to promote their posts. No doubt about it. I've seen it. I've called them out for it. Of course, they don't say anything in return because they know they are AI generated. I wouldn't put it past them to use AI now to make these rallies look bigger than they are. They're definitely doing that. Okay, so going back to these donors, another donor was the son of a hotel owner who verbally harassed a deputy city attorney and threatened to shoot. Okay, I already said that. Carol Langford, a legal ethics expert who headed the American Bar Association Ethics Committee. We don't hear about that shit anymore. Where is the American Bar Association Ethics Committee? No, there's no such thing anymore. Saw the money flow as a major problem. Of course, there's a conflict there. If your office sues someone and you take money from the defendant, that's a conflict. No shit. Then where are you when it came to the Trump thing with all of the malicious prosecution that's going on with him? There's no ethics committee at all anymore when it comes to these, and that's by design. The American Bar Association is run by leftists. They are not going to investigate their own, especially when they are going after Trump. That is a major problem. And the fact that there was an ethics committee back in the early 2000s is laughable. Because now you see the person who kind of slipped through the cracks on that is now basically running for president. Of course, there's a conflict there. If your officer, consider the tenants of these flea bag hotels who are worried about bugs and rats, and then they see someone who is supposed to be protecting them taking money from the landlord. That's Kamala Harris. What are they going to think? Hallinan, who is being vastly outspent in the campaign, who Kamala Harris is running against, claimed that many of the contributors are connected with city government. He argued that they were not giving that money for nothing. She would have trouble dealing with corruption in city agencies because of the conflict of interest. So what he's saying is, I'm not taking money from these people, but you're taking money from these people who are connected. And then when you win, you're not going to investigate these people who are a major problem. And this is now what we're dealing with in politics in the modern day. That's what's happening now. So Harris was involved in all this shit. That's what a scumbag she is. And Willie Brown and everything else. I mean, that's how, it's not just Willie Brown and her being on her knees for Willie Brown. This goes a lot deeper than that. This goes into somebody who's supposed to be protecting innocent people from corruption. And what she ends up doing is taking money from the people who she's supposed to be protecting the public from. And everybody is screaming this back in the early 2000s, that this is a problem. The ethical problems with Harris's campaign went beyond the financial questions. Shortly after the election, complaints emerged from city cleaning crews who said that they were forced during the campaign. Here you go. Listen to this. I forgot about this part. Let me repeat this. The ethical problems with Harris's campaign went beyond the financial questions. Shortly after the election, complaints emerged from city cleaning crews who work for the city, who said they were forced during the campaign to attend political events for mayoral candidate Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris. Willie Brown had a history of deploying a, quote, patronage army, a cadre of city employees who performed political work because they owed him their jobs to help favored candidates win elections. What do you think they're fucking doing now? They're doing that shit now with AI. In this particular case, workers assigned to street cleaning crews complained that they were asked to do political work, including during Kamala Harris's run for district attorney. Mohammed Nuru, a Brown protege hired in 2000, the year 2000, was the deputy director of operations in the city's Department of Public Works. He ran, among other things, a project called San Francisco League of Urban Gardeners, popularly known as SLUG. The organization was supposedly hired by the city to provide cleanup and gardening work around the Bay Area. But they also served another purpose. As a resource to be deployed as part of the Willie Brown machine. In the 2003 election, they were deployed to help, among others, Kamala Harris in her bid for district attorney. Unbelievable. According to internal records, Slug employees were told by their bosses to attend campaign events for Kamala Harris. Campaign manager Rebecca Prozan admitted that she had conversations with the head of Slug, Nuru, throughout the campaign, although she denies asking him to bring workers to the rallies. The results were undeniable. In one instance, Prozan admitted that the Harris campaign had mailed out, listen to this, 9,000 flyers for a public event, but only 50 to 75 people actually showed up. An investigator said, does this not sound familiar to the Biden and now Kamala Harris campaigns? Prozan concluded that all or most of the attendees were in fact Slug workers. Reportedly, Ron Vincent, a former Willie Brown deputy press secretary, led the workers into the events. In the November 2003 elections, Harris came in second behind Hallinan in a three-person race. Because neither candidate received a majority of the vote, there was a runoff. Winning the upset runoff victory in early January 2004, Kamala Harris was sworn in as San Francisco District Attorney. She decided to take the oath on a copy of the Bill of Rights rather than the Bible. That's nice. There were two benedictions, one from a Hindu priest in Sanskrit and the other from an African-American minister. The national anthem was played, as well as the national black anthem. I've seen that more recently in NFL games. After the swearing in, there was sitar music, and soul and Indian food were provided. 1 week after she was sworn in as district attorney, the city opened an investigation into the allegations that city workers were pressured to campaign for Harris and newly elected Mayor Gavin Newsom. How about that? Gavin Newsom. I mean, that's a whole different thing. I hate him more. I hate him more than Kamala Harris. Of course, no charges were ever brought. As San Francisco District Attorney, Kamala Harris enjoyed enormous discretion in the handling of legal cases. She would often determine which cases to prosecute and which to not. This was particularly true in highly public and politically sensitive cases. Over the course of her tenure, a consistent pattern emerged of favoring individuals and institutions that were either her political supporters or those closely aligned with Willie Brown or both. Some of these cases involved all too common instances of big city cronyism and corruption involving city contracts, but other cases would involve disturbing crimes that were covered up. Perhaps the deepest and most troubling mystery of Kamala Harris's tenure as a prosecutor centers on the disturbing issue of sexual abuse by children by priests. Harris often recounts her background as a sex crimes prosecutor early in her career. She's done that recently, by the way. And she attacks others for their illegal failings in this area. In July 2019, for example, she rightly criticized the lax penalties of that pedophile Jeffrey Epstein faced in his plea agreement with prosecutors. Harris attacked the prosecutor in the case, Alex Acosta, who was now labor secretary in the Trump administration, for protecting predators. Harris even went after the law firm that represented Epstein in those criminal proceedings, arguing that their representation of him, quote, calls into question the integrity of the entire legal system. Critics noted that she gladly took campaign donations from the same firm. But Harris's handling of the widespread priest abuse scandal in San Francisco and later in the entire state of California raises far more questions. During her decade-and-a-half tenure as chief prosecutor, Harris would fail to prosecute a single case of priest abuse, and her office would strangely hide vital records on abuses that had occurred despite the protests of victims groups. Harris's predecessor as San Francisco District Attorney Terrence Hallinan was aware of and had prosecuted numerous Catholic priests on sexual misconduct involving children, and he had been gathering case files for even more. In the spring of 2002, Pope John Paul II convened a meeting in Rome to discuss how to deal with the spreading news of abuse. By 2003, with a rising national tide of complaints, the scandals would soon reach cities and towns across America. The Boston Globe produced a Pulitzer Prize-winning series on priest abuse and efforts to cover it up. The scandal had now most definitely engulfed San Francisco. Hallinan's office had launched an investigation and quickly discovered that the San Francisco Archdiocese had extensive internal records concerning complaints going back some 75 years. In the spring of 2002, Hallinan demanded the church turn them over to his office. A month later, the Archdiocese reluctantly complied. The secret documents were explosive and reportedly contained the names of about 40 current and former priests in the San Francisco area that had been identified in sexual abuse complaints. Hallinan used the information from the files to begin pursuing legal cases against them. In nearby San Mateo and Marin County, prosecutors obtained the same church records, and those in Marin charged Father Gregory Ingalls in 2003. But by June 2003, Hallinan and other prosecutors had hit a roadblock. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that California's law extending the statute of limitations for priest abuse cases was unconstitutional. Nevertheless, Hallinan was determined to pursue the cases. Discussions began among California district attorneys about how diocese abuse documents might be released to the public. Victim advocates were in favor of releasing them, arguing that redacting the names of the victims and other sensitive information could protect their privacy. Hallinan's aggressive pursuit of these issues was a major concern to the Catholic Church and related institutions, which were facing mounting legal bills, and settlements dealing with the cases go back decades. Several priests were dismissed due to the anticipated release of the documents. The records that Hallinan had in his possession touched on well-connected institutions at the heart of California's power structure. St. Ignatius College Preparatory School in the Archdiocese of San Francisco counted California Governor Jerry Brown and the powerful Getty family as alumni. The school faced enormous vulnerabilities because of abuse problems there, based on documents later released by the Jesuits who ran St. Ignatius in the nearly 60-year span from 1923 to 1982. In 43 of those years, the school employed at least one priest on the faculty who was later accused of abuse. Hallinan's investigation threatened to bring dozens of additional cases to light. The Catholic Archdiocese in San Francisco had reason to be extremely nervous. According to San Francisco election financial disclosures, high-dollar donations to Harris's campaign began to roll in from those connected to the Catholic Church institutional hierarchy. Harris had no particular ties to the Catholic Church or Catholic organizations, but the money still came in large, in an unprecedented sums. Lawyer Joseph Rossiniello represented the church on a wide variety of issues, including the handling of church abuse scandal. He served on the Catholic Church's National Review Board, NRB, of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. The purpose of the NRB was to review Catholic Church abuse cases. Rossiniello was also part in the San Francisco long-term Cooley Godward. Rossiniello donated the maximum amount by law to her campaign, $1,250, and his law firm added another $2,250. He also sat on Harris's advisory council when she was San Francisco District Attorney. Another law firm, Bingham McCutcheon, which handled legal matters for the Archdiocese concerning Catholic charities, donated $2,825, the maximum allowed. Curiously, Bingham McCutcheon had only donated to 2 other candidates running for office in San Francisco before, for a total of $650. As with Rossiniello, their support was unusual. Another law firm, Arguedas, Kassman, and Headley, was defending a San Francisco priest against abuse claims at the time. They donated $4,550 to Harris. The lawyer in the case, Christina Arguedas, also served on Kamala Harris's advisory council. Beyond these law firms, board members of San Francisco Catholic Archdiocese-related organizations and their family members donated another $50,950 to Harris's campaign. Harris also had ties to those who were working to prevent the Catholic Church documents from coming to light. Harris counts among her mentors Luis Rene, who, as a city attorney from San Francisco, recruited Harris to come work for her as a city attorney after her falling out with Hallinan. Luis Rene's husband, Paul, was an attorney at the law firm Cooley Godward, where Rossiniello worked. Rossiniello negotiated the agreement to bury the abuse records from public view. So I'm going to stop because there's way much more to go in this chapter. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, this is just the church alone, not alone developers and everything else. So anyway, so I'm going to stop it there. It's almost 11. And let me see, Kazan, what you're talking about here real quick. Let me see if I can put that in the show notes, Kazan, real quick. Was this one of her rallies where there was a concert? So everybody's just leaving after the concert's over? I mean, there's still a ton of people there. And of course people are going to end up leaving for whatever reason. But I think that Donald Trump has something to worry about here, because there are a lot of people now that are kind of showing up for these rallies, and I'm not so sure that this is a bad thing. I mean, yeah, people are leaving, but she still has a ton of people at her rallies, way more than what Joe Biden had. But it could be, yeah, it could very well be. Some of the people that are walking, like what I'm looking at right now, yeah, they may very well have been paid to show up, and are like, okay, I got my money, so I'm going to turn around and leave. It's hard to know.
So as you see, it doesn't seem like many people are very interested in actually sticking around for Kamala Harris' speech, which is odd to me. But this is literally, a minute and a half, 2 minutes worth of people literally just walking out, and it's just a never-ending stream. I mean, if I were to record this and continue recording this, it would be a solid 10 minutes of people just leaving in droves. So that's interesting to me. I've never seen a rally where people leave this early.
Okay, so this guy is saying he's never seen people leave that early from a rally. I don't know. I mean, maybe, he knows better than I do. Yeah, and I think you're right, Kaz. I think there's just going to be a lot of people that are going to support her because they're leftists, because they hate Trump. I think she got a huge bump because Biden dropped out of the race. And, again, she's also going to get a huge bump from the DNC. And again, it's just a hatred for Trump. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what ends up happening. But I'm not... I'm very worried about Donald Trump right now. I'm very worried about, what's going to end up happening with him, and his rhetoric. It's just not the same as it used to be. And I am concerned with the amount of people that are showing up to these rallies with Kamala Harris, because I think, and I've said this, I said this off camera, that you could literally put a pile of shit at the pedestal, and these leftists will vote for that pile of shit if it's not Donald Trump, and they say it's a leftist. So, but, and I know, with kind of reading a lot from this book related to Kamala Harris, but I think it's important for people to know that her history as a district attorney in San Francisco and her background with Obama and Willie Brown and all that stuff, and her lack of going after these sexual deviants in the Catholic Church and everything else. I mean, she is corrupt from the very beginning. And it's really interesting how when she goes back from, and I didn't even get into Barack Obama yet, where all the way back then, her relationship back in 2004 has led her to now all of a sudden, because how many times have we seen where Obama has said he'd love to be able to run the government from behind the scenes, and he's running the government now. I think a lot of people would agree that he's actually the president currently, and that he's running the government now behind the scenes. And now somebody like Kamala Harris, who has that connection with Barack Obama, has now all of a sudden been selected to run for president now that Joe Biden has dropped out. And a lot of people are saying that Joe Biden was threatened by Barack Obama to drop out. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. It's past 11. Thanks for showing up tonight, Kazan. Good to see you again. And I will see you all next week. And I appreciate you showing up. And have a great rest of the weekend. And I'll see you soon.